fellow Redeemers. Alright, so in this video series, we've been covering the journey to redemption. And the way we have kind of visualized this is the journey that the Israelites had to take in order to leave Egypt, be delivered out of Egypt into the wilderness, and eventually onto the Promised Land. Now, we've already talked about Egypt. We have talked about how Egypt is basically where we're in our old ways and we are repeating patterns of behavior that we cannot break because we are constantly fulfilling legitimate needs in illegitimate ways. And we've kind of blinded ourselves to a better way. And we really are not interested in hearing about this better way. And then I had another video on the wilderness, which was basically saying that, when you go to pursue this better way, what you will find is that this is going to be incredibly difficult. And it will also be something that's going to require all of your old comforts, whatever you used while you were in quote-unquote Egypt. It's whatever you were using as your principal source of comfort. That has to die. That has to go away. Now, maybe not everything that you used in quote-unquote Egypt has to die, but a lot of it will. It'll be everything that keeps you from getting to the Promised Land. And so that's what this video is today. It's actually talking about the Promised Land. And, it sounds like, finally we made it. We're in the Promised Land. All our problems have gone away. No, not at all. Not even a little bit. In fact, we could say that your problems are just beginning, right? I mean, you finally got to a place where, God called you to be, and now the real work begins, because now you're actually on the path that He wants you on, right? And that's basically the best way to think about the Promised Land, is that, when we're in life and we are traveling on a path, right, that's our own, we're just doing our own thing. There is another path that is much better. Okay, now we are taking this path that we want, but then this other path that is our better possible way is always constantly redrawn, right? It's constantly redrawn onto a better way, on the best possible way that was basically meant for you, okay? That is tailored to you, all right? You can look at this in a secular way, or you can think of it as God saying, okay, you're going this way, and now I got to redraw this path, okay? This would be your path that you should be on. This is the path that I have always wanted you on. And you're like, nah, I'm going to do this, right? And as you continuously do that, this path needs to get redrawn. And now you're on that path. Now you're on that path. That's what it means to be in the Promised Land. You're finally heading in the direction that God has always wanted for you, right? Or that your best possible good, okay, that the best possible version of yourself, you're actually living that life. Now, what does that even look like? Many of us can't even begin to visualize. I'm having a hard time visualizing it. But the very first thing that kind of comes to mind is, if any of you have ever been debt-free for any point of time, okay? Now, most of us are, we're all in debt at some point, and are in debt. I'm in debt. But I have been debt-free in my life. And I will say this, I have never felt poorer than when I was debt-free than whenever I have debt. And I know that sounds a little counterintuitive, but, it's because I have, this credit limit that I can borrow against. And once you make the decision not to use that credit limit, and all of a sudden you only have like maybe let's say $100, $200, $500, whatever the amount is in your bank account, and you're like, no, this is it. There is no credit limit. The credit limit is the number that's in the bank account. Well, then you feel very poor. And that is exactly how being in the promised land feels at first, is that you are now in, you finally got it, right? You finally understand. You've just made it out of the wilderness. You've paid a lot of debts, but now it's time to walk, in the correct way. Okay? And when I say, when I say paid debts, I mean you've basically bled for your sin. And the Lord is basically done. He's done punishing you for it, but you may still have a thorn in your side, right? But that is to keep you humble. Okay, so moving forward in the promised land with a measure of humility is absolutely crucial. Now let's see, how can we describe this in a secular manner? I would say that humility, when we show this, I mean, this is automatically an attractive quality. You're less threatening when you exhibit humility, specifically when you are trying to walk this better path, right? You're trying to be, the reason why you're doing this is you're trying to be an example for others. Okay, you're not trying to show off. No, 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 no. You are trying to show people a better way of conducting themselves by being an example yourself. Okay, now for Christians, it is emulating Jesus, right? We really want to emulate Jesus, and many Christians do not do this. In fact, they're just like, well, I got His grace, I'm good. But that is not how God calls us to walk, right? He wants us to be an example like He was, right? Now we're gonna inevitably fail at it because again we're humans, and God was God, right? And we believe that Jesus was God, and so He walked a very straight and narrow path, a sinless life. But in the same way that a sailor sails by the stars, okay, doesn't mean we're going to get to the star, but it does mean we will get to the place where God intended us to get to, right? It does mean that we will get to the intended destination that this journey was meant to bring us to, okay? Like the best possible good in your life and being an example of that good to others. Now, when that happens, people will see that because it'll be evident, because you will be lighter. Okay, you will be happier. You will have a servant's attitude. And here's the thing, is even when you are going through hard times, and rest assured, in the promised land, you will go through hard times, okay? You will absolutely go through hard times. Hard times is the only guarantee I can give you. There's hard times whether you're in Egypt, whether you're in the wilderness, or whether you are in the promised land. The only guarantee that I can give you, aside from the hard times, is the will and a belief structure that can weather those hard times with such grace as to inspire hope and bring inspiration to other people. That's what it's about. It's about being a light in the darkness, because we all know this world is dark. It is. I mean, it has fleeting moments of light that you want to say that you can find in alcohol or drugs or just having a good conversation with someone, but all of these things are fleeting. You want to have this idea that can actually ground you into permanently being a light. And that's not to say that you're going to get dim every so often. You will. You're only human, right? But the likelihood of you actually being snuffed out is way less when you are in the promised land and you are walking the path that you are meant to walk, by being this example, all right, this role model to other people, to other adults, to peers, to children, to the elderly, to everyone. Okay, you are supposed to exhibit those those principles, you know, and you know, being gentle and being humble is the best way to help out, and especially when people see you suffering and you don't make a big deal of it. And and the crazy thing is if you actually step out of your suffering and people see you suffer and you see somebody in need and then you go and serve them, that is powerful. And that's actually captured in the story of Elijah whenever he went to, I believe it was Sidon. The Lord called him in the middle of a drought to go seek aid from a widow. Again, in the middle of a drought. Okay, now I believe this drought went on for about, at this point, I think it was like a 2-year drought. And he went to a widow, and the widows were obviously the most downtrodden people at the time, period, point blank. Um, and he went to the widow, and the Lord said, like, you're going to get provision from her. And so he saw her collecting sticks, and he asked her, he's like, I would like a cup of water. And if you have a moment, I would also like some a morsel of bread. And this widow said, Sir, uh, you know, I'm making bread. I have enough bread to make for me and my son. And after we do this, we're going to just go home and die. And at first you're like, what the heck is wrong with Elijah? But Elijah was the messenger of God at this point, right? He was the prophet of God. And the widow said, you know what? I'm going to trust in the Lord's provision, right? I'm going to do what is the most amount of good, okay? And in the story, she had just a little bit of olive oil and a little bit of flour, and it was like after that, that was it. And it never ran out, okay? Now, in a secular perspective, you might be saying, well, okay, that's magic. And you're right. I mean, it's a miracle, right? But that's to say the moral of the story that we can actually think of is um, the moral we come to is that when you put the best possible good first and foremost in your life, what we end up finding is a way forward will be created, and people will even step out of their suffering to elevate those around them whenever they are on that path of focusing on the best possible good. And it's extremely useful to understand that anytime we talk about the Lord, okay, is that he is the literal concept of good for Christians, okay? So if it's more palatable for you to sit there and think, okay, the best possible good, okay? That's what that widow did. She stepped out of her suffering, okay, to provide for the best possible good. And lo and behold, she was taken care of. Okay? That is the moral, all right, that you can derive from that. And so when the Israelites actually got to the promised land, they actually went through a myriad of problems because they lost sight of their best possible good. Okay, they actually started trying to lean into their own understanding and figure things out. And they're like, well, you know, this best possible good stuff, I mean, that's fine and everything, but you know what's awesome is you know, sin and debauchery. Basically, indulging our baser selves. Yeah, and that's the thing is when you make it, you got to keep it, right? You got to maintain that. And that's what the Israelites failed to do is they failed to maintain their foundational principles that they had learned in the wilderness, okay? And because of that, they got exiled. They got kicked out of the promised land. They were no longer allowed to be there. And there will be a separate video on exile, you know, because again, some of us have made it to the promised land and then bam, everything just came crashing down. or what we thought was the promised land. And so, you know, those are the things that we have to focus on, is our foundational principles that we learned in the wilderness. We need to grab hold of those. Another, a more contemporary reference would be Rocky, right? Um, when he was, I want to say it was, I think it was Rocky 3 where he was fighting Clever Lang and, Mr. T. And, he was going from win to win to win, and it was pretty easy, but, he wasn't actually fighting any kind of real contenders, and he was just, really comfortable in that. But when a real contender came up, it was a huge issue, you know. And it goes back to, did you build your house on the rock? Okay, because a storm will come. This is life. Okay, storms are going to come. There is no thing out there that is going to stop the storm from coming. The storm will always come. Okay, someone you absolutely love is going to perish, right? That's going to happen eventually. Okay, something that you need will be taken from you, okay, whether from circumstance or from a person, okay? And there is one or two ways to really deal with it, okay? It's to lean on your foundational principles and step out of your suffering and be a role model to others, or you can lament and just continuously be, in this victim state of mind that keeps you down, okay? And yeah, you may get sympathy for a bit. That's not to say you're going to not fall down, okay? If a sufficiently strong storm comes, yeah, you may get knocked down, even if you have foundational principles, but it will be so much easier to get back up and rebuild. And so the lesson I really want to impart for the promised land is sticking to your foundational principles and following the path that you discovered while you were in the wilderness, whatever that is, and to be and continuously be a role model to everyone else. Be that light in the darkness. That is what the promised land is all about. So I think I'm gonna leave it here, but if you like the video, I really appreciate you watching this far, and if you would like to see more of this content, I would, you can hit subscribe, and I would appreciate a like if you like the video. But yeah, I think we'll leave it there for now, and